She said, "I found someone better. Someone whose life isn't just their pathetic little job." I just stood there in the doorway of my lab as she walked away. I didn't say a single word. She was leaving me for my boss. I am now dating my boss's daughter. She loves my pathetic job. Don't miss the twist. Subscribe and be part of the journey. I, Nathan, 37, male, had been with Claire, 35, for 6 years. Our life was a study in contrasts, set against the dramatic coastline of coastal Maine. I was a senior researcher at a private marine biology institute, a job I loved that involved long hours in a cold water lab. My salary was a steady but unspectacular $110,000 a year. My work focused on the intricate world of deep sea corals. Claire was the head of fundraising for a local contemporary art museum, a career that placed her at the center of the region's wealthy summer social scene. We lived in a small, modern house I had designed, a space of clean lines and big windows that looked out over the rocky shore. Our social life was a constant negotiation. My idea of a good time was a quiet evening reading scientific journals. Hers was a gala, a yacht club reception, or a high-powered dinner with potential museum donors. Her world was one of polished surfaces and strategic conversations. My world was one of cold water, patient observation, and the slow, deep time of the ocean. My boss, Dr. Alistair Croft, was the director of the institute. He was a lion in his field, a brilliant scientist who had long ago traded the lab for the boardroom. He was charismatic, powerful, and a major figure in the same social circles Claire moved in. His daughter, an illustrator named Sophie, was the quiet opposite of her father. She would sometimes visit the lab, her sketchbook full of beautiful, accurate drawings of the strange creatures I studied. She had a genuine curiosity that I rarely saw in anyone from my wife's world. Update 1. The beginning of the end came in the form of a grant. The National Science Foundation had approved my proposal for a 6-month, deep sea research expedition off the coast of Norway. It was the culmination of a decade of my work, a chance to study a unique coral ecosystem that had never been explored. It was the professional opportunity of a lifetime. I told Claire over dinner at a restaurant she had chosen, a place known more for its scene than its food. Her reaction was a perfect, polished performance of disappointment. "Norway? For 6 months?" she asked, her fork hovering over her plate. "To do what exactly?" "Stare at rocks at the bottom of the ocean. It's groundbreaking research, Claire," I explained, my voice full of an excitement she refused to share. "It's a career detour to a frozen wasteland," she countered. "Our life is here. My biggest fundraising event of the year is in 3 months. You're just going to miss it." She saw my life's work not as a passion, but as a scheduling conflict, a pathetic little job that interfered with her more important ambitions. Update 2. I told her I would withdraw my grant application. I let her believe her world, her priorities, had won. But the next morning, I quietly sent the foundation my formal acceptance and began the long, complex process of outfitting the expedition. Claire, confident in her victory, became even more dismissive of my work. Nathan was going to run off to the North Pole. She would tell her friends with a theatrical laugh. I had to remind him that his real life was here. Her friends, a chorus of wealthy patrons and social climbers, would nod in agreement. They saw my dedication as a charming but foolish eccentricity. During this time, Sophie Croft, my boss's daughter, became a quiet confidant. She was helping me design the mission patch for the expedition, and she would spend hours in my lab, sketching the equipment and asking intelligent questions. "My dad used to be like you," she told me one afternoon, her voice quiet, before he decided that raising money was more important than raising questions. Her words were a sad, quiet validation. The day after our conversation, I opened a new bank account and began methodically separating my finances. I was charting a course for a new life, and I was doing it alone. Update 3. The confrontation happened in my lab. It was late. I was calibrating a deep sea camera sled. Claire came in, dressed for a party. She told me she was leaving me. She said she had found someone better, someone whose life wasn't just a pathetic little job. She told me she was with Alistair. I did not argue. I did not plead. The news was not a shock, it was a final, clarifying data point in an experiment that had been failing for years. She expected a scene, a dramatic confirmation of her own irresistible power. I gave her nothing. I just stood in the doorway of my lab and watched her walk away. The quiet hum of the water pumps was the only sound in the room. The next day, I moved my few personal belongings out of the house I had designed and built. I moved into a small, furnished apartment near the docks. 3 weeks later, I was on a research vessel, sailing toward the cold, clean waters of the Norwegian Sea. Update 4. The expedition was a staggering success. We discovered 3 new species of coral and a hydrothermal vent ecosystem that changed our understanding of deep, sea life. The work was grueling, the conditions were harsh, and I was happier than I had been in a decade. My only connection to the world I had left behind was a satellite email account. Sophie and I became regular correspondents. She would send me news from the Institute, and I would send her digital photos of the strange, beautiful world I was exploring. Our emails were a quiet, steady conversation, a lifeline of shared curiosity. I heard through a former colleague that Claire and Alistair were now the undisputed power couple of the coastal Maine social scene. They were living in my house, hosting lavish parties. My name and my pathetic little job were never mentioned. Update 5. Our discoveries were so significant that a major science journal fast-tracked our first paper for publication. The story was picked up by international news outlets. The pathetic little job was suddenly a global news story. The Institute's communications department put out a press release, with my name and a photo of me on the deck of the research vessel, holding a piece of newly discovered coral. The news, of course, reached Claire and Alistair. The first email from her was a work of art, a perfect blend of feigned pride and subtle regret. She had always known I was brilliant. She said Alistair was a demanding, difficult man, and that she missed our quiet life. My parents, who had been heartbroken and confused, called me on the satellite phone, their voices filled with a fierce, quiet pride. "We saw you on the news, son," my dad said. "We always knew your work was important." Update 6. I returned from the expedition to a world that had fundamentally changed. I was no longer a quiet, obscure researcher. I was a star in my field. I was also in love with Sophie, a truth that had become clear in the quiet intimacy of our months of correspondence. Claire appeared at my new, much larger, and more modern lab at the Institute a week after I returned. She had a speech prepared, a performance of a woman who had seen the error of her ways. "Nathan," she said, her voice soft and full of a practiced emotion. "I was wrong. I was intimidated by your brilliance. Alistair is nothing but a shallow administrator." "He is your choice," I replied, my voice calm. "I want to come back," she said. "I can help you. I can help you manage your new fame." "You don't want to come back to me, Claire," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You just want to be a part of a better story. Last year, I was a pathetic loser. This year, I'm a scientific hero. The only thing that's changed is the headline." I told her about Sophie. I told her we were together. The look on her face was not one of heartbreak. It was the cold, hard look of a strategist who had just been outmaneuvered. Update 7. Their retaliation was a clumsy, desperate attempt to reclaim the narrative. Alistair, as the director of the Institute, tried to claim that my discoveries were the sole property of the institution and that I was merely a technician who had followed his instructions. He tried to sideline me, to make me a footnote in the story of my own work. The scientific community, however, is a world built on data and reputation. My expedition logs, my research notes, and the public record of my grant proposal were an irrefutable testament to my leadership. Alistair's attempt to steal my credit was seen for what it was: the desperate act of a man whose own scientific career had ended decades ago. Claire's online campaign was even less successful. She tried to paint herself as the wronged woman, the muse who had been abandoned by the ungrateful artist. But Sophie, in a rare public statement on her popular art blog, wrote a quiet, devastating post. She didn't attack Claire. She simply wrote about her father's long, slow drift from a passionate scientist to a power-hungry administrator. She wrote about my quiet dedication, a dedication that reminded her of the man her father used to be. The post, coming from Alistair's own daughter, completely destroyed Claire's narrative. Update 8. A year later, Alistair had been forced into an early, ignominious retirement. The Institute's board, embarrassed by the scandal, had replaced him. Claire had left him and moved to Boston, taking a lesser job at a smaller museum. I, on the other hand, had been given my own research division, funded by a massive new grant. Sophie and I were living together in a beautiful old house by the sea, a home filled with her art and my books. Our life was a quiet, happy collaboration. I received one last, long email from Claire. It was a rambling, self-pitying account of her failures. She blamed me. She blamed Alistair. She blamed his daughter. She ended by saying she was sorry, not for what she had done, but for the fact that her life hadn't turned out the way she had planned. I deleted it without a reply. Final update: a few months ago, I was at a conference, presenting my latest findings. After my talk, I was approached by a man who introduced himself as Alistair's graduate school roommate. "I saw what he and that woman tried to do to you," he said, shaking his head. Alistair was the most brilliant student in our year. But he was seduced by the idea of power. He forgot that in our line of work, the only real power is in the discovery. He looked at me, a look of genuine respect in his eyes. "You never forgot." His words were a final, quiet validation. The lesson I had learned was simple. Some people see the world as a stage, and life as a performance for an audience. But a real life, a life of substance and meaning, is lived in the quiet, unglamorous, and often lonely work of the lab. It is built not on the story you tell, but on the truth you uncover. And that is a foundation that can withstand any storm,